You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Peter, I know it's the holiday season, but don't go out and celebrate too much for the holidays or else you might get kicked in the nuts and arrested.
This was the funniest open you've done in quite a while on this show, Stevie.
Well, thank you. I try. I borrow from current news to keep our show topical.
Alright, so who kicked who in the nuts here?
Well, apparently, Juliana Pena kicked two guys in the nuts in a bar brawl, and she was with her training partner, Josh Gow, and they were drunk, and they got in a fight in another bar, and then they left that bar and tried to go somewhere else to clean up, but the bar owner told them the bar was closed. She got pissed off that they wouldn't let him come in and wash off the blood on his face, so she kicked the bar employee in the groin, kicked the owner in the groin twice, and Gow just sat there and watched the whole thing because he was so drunk he couldn't do anything. And then he rubbed his bloody face all over the front window of the bar.
Now, did the cops give the guys 5 minutes to recover from the low blow?
No, they did not. They just showed up and arrested everybody.
So is she charged with assault or drunken disorderly or what?
Let's see. The list of charges includes 2 counts of assault and nothing about drunken disorderly, but maybe that's just lumped in with the assault charge.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you hate to see anyone in the world of mixed martial arts behind bars or arrested or what have you, but I mean, you can't go around kicking people in the nuts. I mean,
no, and I think the larger point here is the fact that she and her training partner Josh were so drunk they got in a fight in another bar, left that bar, and they went into a second bar and got in a fight there. Now that's just... somebody should have called it a night long before that. Somebody should have called a cab. Somebody should have cut them off. They should have realized they were that drunk and quit drinking. I mean, there's a whole list of you should have, you could have, why didn't you?
We've said on the show before, I'll say it again, when you're in the public eye, you have to be above reproach, and any slip-up will have that magnifying glass effect on you.
Well, I'm not saying fighters, wrestlers, actors have to be saints. I mean...
Oh, hell no.
We all enjoy going out, having a drink, watching sports at the bar, you know? There's got to be some room for leverage, you know, to go out and have a good time and maybe get a little intoxicated if you want to, but in a responsible way, like have a ride home and don't get in a bar brawl. Those should be the 2 keys.
Have a handler, a bodyguard, some type of protection to protect you from these type of scenarios.
Well, the more famous you are, the less you probably want to go out and do it in the public eye, but if you're Juliana Pena, you're probably somewhere in that borderline range of like, I can go to a bar and have a drink with a few friends and probably not get bothered by anybody, but at the same time, you're also a trained mixed martial artist, and you're deadly with your hands and your feet, so don't get so drunk you get in a bar brawl and seriously injure people. That's just bad.
Well, don't some states, like if a UFC fighter, for example, gets arrested, their hands can be registered as deadly weapons?
It varies by jurisdiction, but I've heard of that happening. I think we've talked about it a few times here.
Yeah, and no, we're not talking about the movie Con Air.
No, we're not.
So hopefully Pena is not going to be away from the octagon for too long.
I believe the maximum that she can get is a fine of $5,000 and imprisonment of up to 1 year.
Wow.
But you know how this goes. They'll plead her out.
All right, let's move on to UFC on Fox Dos Anjos versus Cerrone 2, otherwise known as UFC on Fox 17 for those who still believe in the numbered system.
Otherwise known as UFC All the Underdogs Win.
No, I like to just call the show UFC
UFC Upset City.
Yeah.
Not Suplex City, Upset City.
Not Pity City, not Suplex City.
Upset City.
Wow. This card, on paper, looked to go one way, and it flipped the script on us here.
Yeah, if you were betting everything other than the main event, and you bet the dogs, you would have had a magnificent parlay.
Let's start at the bottom with the prelims on Fight Pass, and we had a decision, an anaconda choke, and a knockout. So one of all the finishes here.
Yeah, but I didn't watch Fight Pass, so I can tell you what happened. I know the results. Nagano beat Enrique by knockout, 2 minutes 53 seconds of the second round. Luque beat Hassan with an anaconda choke, and I guess it was a technical choke because he went out cold. And then Usman beat Edwards by decision across the board, 29-28 times 2, and 30-27.
Now we go on to the other part of the prelims card, and we have another eye poke finish here.
Yeah, and this one really sucked because it got all the way through the first round. It wasn't like the World Series fighting one where it just ended like 10 seconds into the fight. This one was really brutal because if it had gone to the third round, they could have at least gone to the cards, but it was only a minute and change into the second round, so nope. It was a no contest for Cole Miller and Jim Ehlers in what was looking like a pretty good fight.
Nick Lentz beating Danny Castillo via split decision, 29-28, 28-29, and 30-27.
You always call him Dana White's favorite fighter, so what do you think Dana White's reaction was?
I had it 29-28. I could see the argument for 28-29, but that judge that gave it 30-27, not sure about that one.
Yeah, 29-28 either way doesn't seem outrageous, but a clear 3-round decision for Nick Lentz, that doesn't quite ring true.
But that wasn't the only really weird score on this night.
No, far from it. But, hey, in the next fight, it was pretty darn decisive, with Tamden McCrory getting the triangle choke on Josh Salmon in the third round.
Poor Josh Salmon here.
Nothing poor about it. I'm happy that the Barn Cat is back in UFC.
But that choke, in the third round, like, what a way to go out, right? You're so close to the end, you go to the judges. If your game plan is to go to the judges, and that was just a nice triangle choke. Like, I mean, it's hard to say a bad triangle choke, but it was pretty good. It was in there, and he's like, I tapped. There's no, I'm screwed.
Well, here's how good I thought it was. They told us in the rankings, they send out this advisory for the rankings, and they say, this guy could move up a few spots with a win, this guy could move a few spots down, this guy probably won't move up at all, blah, blah, blah. They give you all the rundown of how you should adjust your rankings after the fights. And for CB Dalloway, it said, this guy could move to the bottom if he loses or drop out of the top 15 altogether. So, I know I'm spoiling this a little when I say this, but I saw that triangle choke, I saw how good McCrory looked, I saw how bad CB Dalloway looked, and I'm like, you know what? McCrory is more of a top 15 guy than Dalloway. So I adjusted my rankings accordingly.
So, if those two fighters fought, you take McCrory?
I'm not sure I would take McCrory over Marquardt, but I'd take him over Dalloway.
All right, we move on to the women's bantamweights with Valentina Shevchenko against Sarah Kaufman.
Which, another strange advisory from the UFC rankings, because they told us, due to a technical error, we might not even be able to rank Shevchenko with a win.
What was the error?
Apparently UFC hadn't submitted her name because she was such a late replacement.
Okay.
But then she ended up being in the rankings panel anyway, even though they advised us that she wouldn't be.
Maybe they were able to flip the switch at the last second.
I guess so, but either way, she definitely flipped the switch in this fight and gave Sarah Kaufman more than she thought.
Right person won here?
I think so. I think Shevchenko was the better fighter overall, but it was close. I mean, split decision tells you that it was close, but 29-28 either way, I mean, I would still say 29-28 Shevchenko.
we move on to aforementioned CB Dalloway against Nate Marquardt. And on this show last week, I talked about Marquardt still having some gas in the tank.
I was skeptical. I was very skeptical, and I will admit I was wrong.
But Dalloway, it's just...
Dalloway is just turning into a failure here. No offense to the guy, but it's like his third, fourth loss in a row at this point.
Like, I don't know if you cut him after this or you give him one last chance, but when you tell a guy like Marquardt, another loss and you're probably cut, and I said last week, you're playing with house money, that power is underrated.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was part of a long night of upsets, so let's not give him too much credit. This was just a fluky night on the whole.
You think Dalloway's got a strong jaw then?
I don't know what Dalloway's got at all at this point.
Alrighty, let's move on then to the main event of the prelims with Charles Oliveira against Miles the Fury Jury at a catchweight because Oliveira cannot make weight.
Again, this is like the third time now for him.
We're talking a pound or two.
No, this was 5.5 pounds. This was 150.5 for the catchweight. This guy is not going to be allowed to fight at featherweight anymore. He's going to have to permanently move up to lightweight.
Fine, I have no problem with that. No compassion for that, because if you show up 1 pound, 2 pounds, okay, but when you're 5 pounds over, although at the weigh-ins, did you notice the fighters were all confused on the scale?
Yeah, some of them were actively bitching that the scale was wrong, that they weighed him beforehand and the scale didn't match the scale at the venue. It was very controversial. A lot of people were pissed.
Do you think you might cut Oliveira some slack here because maybe it was an electronic malfunction or a scale malfunction for this card?
There's slack, and then there's no chance in hell. I mean, if your scale at home says 145.5 and the scale at the building says 146.25, then you can go, there's something wrong with the scale, weigh it again. But if you're 4 or 5 pounds over, that's not within the range of discrepancy at all.
I think it was Dalloway. He lost 2 pounds by taking off his underwear.
Oh yeah, 1.5 pounds. The heaviest underwear in history, according to Joe Rogan.
Are they made of lead, or?
Kryptonite in those damn underwear. Maybe he's taking really big dumps into his underwear right before he took them off. I don't know.
Did you do the Bret Hart trick with the iron plate under his shirt?
Yeah, I really have no idea here. But it doesn't matter. The whole point here should be Oliveira. I mean, let's give him credit for the win. He got a guillotine choke on Miles Jury. But this poor guy, it was his debut at featherweight. He fights a guy who didn't even make the weight when he did. And not only does he lose the fight, but he drops in the lightweight rankings too. It's like, man, there should be some sort of free pass for this when you fought a guy who couldn't even make the weight and it was your debut and you did.
Well, speaking of debuts, why don't you talk about the first fight on the main card?
Yes, Karolina Kowalczyk and Randa Markos. This, I guess I could have seen the second round going either way. I can understand that it went to Kowalczyk. I felt like it was going to be 29-28 Markos, but again, this was a long night of upsets, and this proved to be another one. But the one thing that I absolutely do have a problem with is the judge who gave it 30-27 to Kowalczyk, because there's no way. There's a whole round in this fight where Randa Markos is just riding piggyback on her and looking for submissions the whole time. There's no way Kowalczyk won that round with Randa Markos on her back.
Well, someone asked me in private message the day after this show and asked me, so is this fight an upset? And I said, you don't watch the minor leagues, do you? You don't watch Invicta, you don't watch World Series, you don't watch any other promotion except UFC, do you? Because in Invicta, she was amazing.
Yeah. No, there's no question. I mean, we're talking about two highly skilled women here. You know, like you said, they both have great records coming into this fight, whether it's in UFC or elsewhere. So it's not, I wouldn't call it a huge upset, but on paper, it was at least a small upset.
I'm going to throw a hockey reference in. Like the Toronto Maple Leafs, they played the LA Kings a over the weekend, and the Kings are one of the better teams, and the Leafs are near the bottom of the division, and they beat the Kings 5-0. Why is that significant? It's because until you play the game, or once that door is closed, anything can happen. An upset can happen. Talented thing might happen. Buddy might score 2 quick goals on you. You might get a lucky punch. Hell, we've seen fighters who are losing through a spinning back fist and win the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Once that door is closed, once that puck is on the ice, anything and everything can happen. This fighter here, 7-0 in Invicta, making a UFC debut against a very talented fighter in Marcos, and gets the W.
Yeah, so we'll give her the credit, but I still don't agree with the judge who scored all 3 rounds for her, because that guy was asleep at the switch and not even watching the fight.
He gets the Cecil People Award.
Indeed he does.
Can't believe they made that figure. I gotta find you the Cecil People's action figure.
Alright, well anyway, we're going to talk about more decisions here, so let's talk about Nate Diaz and Michael Johnson.
Well, Stevie, I want to talk about this fight, but beep, 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 beep.
Well, yeah, the post-fight promo was probably more noteworthy than the fight itself in some respects, because not a second of that aired in the U.S., and overseas affiliates where they don't have broadcasting restrictions, that was where everybody found out what he actually said, because those people immediately looped it, put it on Twitter, and we all got to hear him talking about how Conor McGregor was blankety-blank, and he wants to kick that blankety-blank's ass.
We heard Conor McGregor. I was like, oh, he's talking about Conor. Turn it up. No, I said turn it up. Damn it, Nate.
You know what the best part of it was if you watch the unedited version?
What's that?
At the very end, Joe Rogan is holding back and trying not to laugh, and he just smiles at Nate and he says, well, unfortunately, Nate, you can't say any of those things on Fox.
Yeah. I know. You know, Fox has standards.
Well, they are an over-the-air terrestrial broadcaster. It's not like being on cable or satellite where you might be able to get away with a few things, but the FCC ain't going to let that fly on a public broadcast network.
You can't say that on Fox. It's like when the Daily Show says Fox News Channel was right. It's like they were...
Well, anyway, let's talk about the fight itself. Michael Johnson was doing okay in the first round. The second round, and especially the third, Nate just completely took over. He had the longer reach. He was jabbing effectively. He was taunting him, and it got in Johnson's head, and he kept trying to bull rush, and it just went badly in rounds 2 and 3. There was no doubt Nate Diaz was the winner after this fight, and when people said I was confused and maybe I shouldn't be upset about it because I said that Johnson should have been better than that, they thought I was talking about the post-fight antics. And I was talking about the fact that I thought Johnson was a better fighter than that. I thought he would come in there and handle Nate Diaz, and he let the oldest Diaz trick in the book. He let him get under your skin and then just completely lose your cool in the fight. And they were jaw-jacking after the fight. They got in a leg lock after the fight. These two were ready to go for 5 more minutes. They didn't want to quit.
Why don't you talk about what happened in the pre-fight at the hotel?
Yeah, I guess they got in a scuffle there too and had to be separated by security, and Johnson was yelling shit at him like, yeah, you're acting tough with your boys. Get rid of them. Let's see what really happens.
Do you think the pre-fight antics had something to do with Johnson's performance?
Well, again, in the first round, I thought he was doing okay, but by the second round, you could tell he was losing his cool, and by the third round, when he was getting outboxed by Diaz, he completely fell apart. And then both of them deserve some sort of ignominious award for their behavior afterward. And like I said, I'm not talking about the promo Nate Diaz cut, because that's Nate Diaz being Nate Diaz. I'm talking about the unnecessary leg lock, the fact that Johnson went after him even after he let go of it. I mean, it was just not cool in general. And then you see the entire Diaz team there, and it's Jake Shields and all those other guys, and it's like, weren't you just in this situation a few months ago in World Series fighting when Husmar Palhares wouldn't let go of you when he got a heel hook on, and now your boy Diaz is doing the same thing?
I got no answer for that one.
Yeah, there was a lot of stupidity in general at the end of this fight. But if you're talking about just the fight itself, Diaz won rounds 2 and 3 and won the fight. There's no question about that.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next one, and it is this co-main event with Alistair Overeem against Junior Dos Santos in, I don't want to say a number one contenders fight, but pretty darn close to one.
I think the number one contenders fight is actually coming up here in a couple of weeks at UFC 195.
With who?
You don't remember?
Well, I know Verdun is fighting Velasquez again.
No. Before that, you got Stipe Miocic and Andrei Arlovsky.
Right, Arlovsky. Okay.
Yeah. So this isn't a number one ranking fight by any means, but it definitely shakes up the weight class because Junior Dos Santos was near the top and Alistair Overeem was nowhere near the top. And for the first round, it didn't look like either one of them really wanted this fight. There was 5 minutes of circling and feinting and pawing, and nothing happened. I mean, literally nothing happened in the first 5 minutes. If you scored it 10-10, I wouldn't argue. But in that second round, Overeem caught him while he was backpedaling, and Junior just crumbled. And people were saying, that's an early stoppage. He was getting up. He wasn't out. But when he was getting up, he wasn't steady. He was still falling down trying to get up. To me, that means you're rocked. You can't defend yourself. That is an intelligent stoppage on the part of the referee.
I think in the past he's gotten the benefit of the doubt, but in this fight he didn't get the benefit of the doubt from the ref. And he was livid after that fight. Holy crap.
Yeah, but he got rocked. There's nothing to be livid about. Alistair Overeem has power, and the thing that's really changed, and I have to give Overeem credit for it where I did not give him credit before, I will amend my previous remarks, and when I said that he doesn't have gas, and if you go more than 3 minutes with him, he's in trouble, that first round may have been boring as fuck, but he's learned that being boring in the first round gives him gas in the tank for rounds 2 and 3 and beyond. So I got to give him credit for an effective fighting strategy. He figured out a way to make his fighting style work for him, and it did in spectacular fashion here by getting the TKO. So Alistair Overeem is better than I gave him credit, and I will humble myself and say that.
Well, for the first few minutes, I mean, no offense to our European listeners, but it felt like a soccer match because nothing was happening.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. That was my assessment of round 1 as well.
At one point, I said to the screen, and you know you're a fan when you start yelling stuff at the screen, right? But I was like, they do know it's a fight, right?
Yeah, it just looked like a workout session or a sparring match. It didn't look like a fight for the first 5 minutes. But again, I'm going to give Overeem credit for that. He did that on purpose so he'd have gas in the tank for the rest of the fight. So if that's his strategy, it worked.
It reminded me of, who was it? Pat Barry and Krokop.
Mm-hmm.
That type of, okay guys, let's go, stop the sparring. Oh, we're on kick, done. What? Like, it's like, I know you respect each other's power, I get it, but at some point someone has to throw a punch here, and eventually Overeem did.
Yeah, Overeem was just quicker to the trigger. You gotta give him his props.
Absolutely.
Speaking of quicker to the trigger, Rafael Dos Anjos and Donald Cerrone, talk about lightning quick. Dos Anjos just tore him up.
Yeah, Dos Anjos defeats Cerrone for the second time. Oh,
66 seconds. You know what it reminded me of? You know what it honestly reminded me of? When Junior beat Kane on the very first Fox show, because that was only 64 seconds.
Yeah, on a torn meniscus, I remember.
Yeah, but still, whether it was torn or not, you got to give Junior the credit for landing those perfect punches. And just the same here, I give Dos Anjos all the credit in the world for absolutely just wrecking shit in this fight. And this was his first title defense since winning the title. And people who said, including me, that he might have a problem with making weight now that there's no IVs and that he probably won't be as ripped up as he used to be and he probably won't be as good as he used to be, Wrong, wrong, and wrong. And at what point do we start recognizing that Dos Anjos is legitimately the best lightweight in the world right now? Because this is 4 straight wins over 4 quality opponents. Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, and Donald Cerrone. And a couple of these guys he just blew through like they weren't even there. So Dos Anjos really is that good.
I wonder if the odds have changed on a potential Dos Anjos-McGregor fight after the Cerrone victory.
You know what? And I mean no disrespect to Conor McGregor, but I would stay at featherweight and fight Frankie Edgar. After seeing this Dos Anjos, I wouldn't want a piece of him if I was Conor McGregor.
I don't know.
I know what McGregor says. I know he talks about accuracy being more important than power and timing being more important than speed and how he can land a better punch than other people can. I don't dispute that. And especially in his own weight class, his natural weight class, I don't dispute that. But Dos Anjos is going to be bigger. Dos Anjos is going to hit harder. And I think that even with all his bluster, I don't know if Conor McGregor can overcome that advantage.
I think it's in the realm of possibility. I think we will see that fight one day. I just don't know how soon we'll get it because Conor wants to basically be a dual champion, like we said last week, and Dana White said, that's not going to happen. So,
well, you heard what Dos Anjos had to say in his post-fight interview about it.
Remind me again?
He said, Mr. McGregor, you are a great champion. Stay in your weight class. You don't want this.
I want to see McGregor's response. I don't want this, son. I want it right now.
That's exactly what McGregor would say.
Oh.
Hey, you know what? McGregor's been a hot topic for a few weeks now. I got to tell you a little quick story here before we move on.
Okay.
I was talking about him calling out people in higher weight classes and whether that's a good idea for fighters or not to do. And I was talking to King Mo at the time. And I expected King Mo to talk about whether or not he should be calling out, Fedor, which he said he wouldn't do because he respects Fedor and this, that, and the other. And we got into a sidebar because on Twitter, he had told Conor that he shouldn't be comparing himself to Muhammad Ali. And people got on King Mo's case about that. So we ended up in this whole sidebar in my interview about what he said and what he meant. And what he actually is trying to get across was if Conor wants to compare himself to Cassius Clay, he's okay with that because Cassius Clay was young and cocky and brash and called his shots and knocked people out in the rounds that he said he was going to, just like Conor McGregor does. But when he became Muhammad Ali, he became a civil rights leader. He had to vacate his title. He had a completely different mindset and philosophy. So his point was not that Conor McGregor shouldn't be compared to other great champions, but if you're going to compare yourself to Ali, don't do it because Cassius Clay is actually the better comparison. And I never expected mentioning Conor McGregor would lead into that discussion, just like you probably never expected me to say that here on this show.
Well, I mean, he converted to Islam. He, as you said, he changed his whole philosophy, civil rights, all that stuff. I don't see Conor McGregor on that scale. I agree with your Cassius Clay comparison.
Well, it's King Mo that made the comparison, so let's give him the credit.
There's also another story with Diaz. I believe it was at the post-fight, or maybe during the press conference. I'm trying to remember which one it was. But he was saying he was promised the next shot. And he was actually cursing out McGregor as well at the post-fight. But
yeah, he did make the claim that Joe Silva and Dana White had offered him the match.
And Silva's like, no, we didn't.
Mm-hmm. But the Diaz brothers say things like that all the time. You know this.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, Nick Diaz will still claim that he's supposed to get another fight with GSP.
Overall, the show on Fox, I didn't think it would do a good rating just because the way it's placed in the Christmas schedule and ratings weren't that good.
Well, I think people were also burned out after 3 straight days of UFC the week before, so that probably has a little something to do with it as well.
Plus, the last Saturday before Christmas, how many people went to a Christmas party?
Yeah, probably more than a few, but I would say more just the overkill of 4 shows in 10 days. And five if you're counting the next one we're going to talk about.
Venue, I'd never heard of it before. The Chelsea at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas?
Yeah, fancy that, right? Wow. They haven't had any fights there recently. Oh, wait, they have.
Have they scrubbed the blood off the walls yet, or is it still fresh?
Well, if they weren't scrubbing before, they don't need to afterward, because there wasn't any blood shed here at all.
9 fights, 8 decisions.
Yeah. Wow, this was so much fun to cover.
Let's briefly touch on 2 fights here. Let's talk about Shayman Moraes against Robbie Peralta.
The first and only fight that actually went to a decision. And Peralta came in with something to prove because he'd lost his last 2 fights before UFC cut him. And he told me that he was going to prove that his hands were deadly and that Shayman Moraes was a good quality opponent, but that he could hit harder and was a better fighter overall. And Shayman Moraes proved him wrong. He moved up in weight class from bantamweight to featherweight, looked perfectly natural at 145 pounds, and had power too. He knocked Robbie Peralta on his ass and TKO'd him 3 minutes 21 seconds for the only finish of the card. So give Shayman Moraes his props.
Give him the bonus money.
If there's bonus money to be had on this card, it all goes to him.
And why don't you talk about the featherweight championship fight?
Well, Lance Palmer clearly won 2 rounds out of this fight. The opening round and the final round. And in both cases, he used takedowns and out-wrestled his opponent on the mat. For the second and the third round, Almeida was the more effective striker, stuffed almost every takedown attempt, and really made Palmer look like he was losing the fight and was going to need to dig his way out of a hole. So the 4th round is the key round in this whole thing, because for the first 3 minutes, he was outstriking Palmer, was just totally dominating with his size and reach, and he had a sizable advantage over him. Like, sizable to the point where in UFC, with IV being disallowed and USADA testing, I don't know if this guy could be that big at featherweight in UFC, but that's neither here nor there. The size advantage was working in his favor until Palmer took him down and rode him out for the last 2 minutes of the 4th round. So, you gotta kind of give it to Almeida for winning more of the round, but that wasn't a sure thing until it went to the judges' scorecards, because sometimes judges remember who was on top and not who won more of the round, and Palmer was on top of him at the end of the 4th round. But when it went to the scorecards, it was all in favor of Almeida, 48-47.
Winner and new featherweight champion.
And deservedly so. He did win 3 out of 5 rounds. But you know what? I would give Palmer the immediate rematch, because this was not a domination. This was not a blowout. Palmer could go back in there, change his strategy, and win this fight. And the thing he needs to do is not be afraid to engage Almeida. I know he's got a size and a reach advantage, but you know how you negate that? You don't give him the distance to use the range. You get in there close, you make it a sparring, you make it a heavy-hitting contest in close range, you risk taking the shot to land a shot, and you negate that reach advantage that you can't overcome.
Yeah, I definitely would rematch them. I just don't know how long that will take.
Well, in World Series of Fighting, that could happen in 3 or 4 months, because look how it happened with Gaethje and Palomino. True.
All right, so, I mean, let's talk news, and with the Christmas season upon us, I mean, we're not going to get, it's not a new, very much news-heavy portion this week, but, I mean, we do have some news and notes for sure. But overall, let's just put it this way, the UFC show on Fox was 10 times better than the World Series of Fighting show.
Yeah, that's not even a comparison at this point. They're on two different planets right now, and World Series of Fighting usually has good shows. But every now and then you're going to have one that's a four-finger stinker, just like every now and then UFC has a bad show too. It just happens sometimes.
Four-finger stinker?
Never heard that phrase before?
No.
I'm not going to explain it to you on the air then.
Guess who's the latest to use mixed martial arts as a rehab tool?
Peyton Manning?
Marshawn Lynch.
I knew it was going to the NFL.
Well, that's interesting. I remember Shaquille O'Neal was training in mixed martial arts a little bit to rehab an injury a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. It's a good form of cross-training because you have to do all sorts of different things. You got to wrestle, you got to box, you got to practice jiu-jitsu. It's a good way to get in shape.
Now, how far are you from Kansas?
Depends on what part of Kansas.
You Bellator 150. It's going to be the unbeaten Augusto Sakai against Chick Congo.
Yeah, that's like 6.5 hours away from me, maybe 7. I've made that drive before, and it's a long drive.
Good news on Miesha Tate updates. She looks like she'll be back in February, and she thinks if Holm and Rousey fight again, that Rousey will be 0-2.
A lot of people think that at this point. Unless, I mean, let me put it this way. Everything I just said about Lance Palmer and Almeida, vary it up a little bit, but not that much, and you apply it to Holm and Rousey, because Rousey needs to change her strategy, not chase her, get in close, and make it a dirty boxing affair. She needs to pressure her, but not chase her.
Now, we rarely talk about this, but we have UFC free agent news.
That's right. Overeem is a free agent.
Okay, 3 names then. I had 2, and you just added a third one. We've got Alistair Overeem, we've got Aljamain Sterling, we've got Benson Henderson.
Yeah, and apparently there is, at least on the rumor mill, without any official confirmation, that Bellator has made Benson Henderson an offer, but in at least 2 out of those 3 cases, UFC has the matching rights clause. Maybe all 3.
Now, Benson Henderson is meeting with UFC this week. Sterling has been told he's clear to pursue other offers if that's what he wants to do, and I have no update on Overeem right now.
I assume Overeem will get a matching offer from anybody else, but I'm not surprised, really, with Aljamain bad-mouthing the UFC that they would let him go. Even though he's highly ranked in the bantamweight division right now, they probably just feel like he's more of a headache than they really want.
But his record's undefeated.
I know, dude, I agree with you. This is not about the fact that he's a great fighter. It's about the fact that they just plain don't like him.
Well, I hate to see him go, and if he goes to Bellator, there's some dream matchups there. If he stays UFC, I mean, I'm sure give him a couple more fights, he could probably fight for a title. But, I mean, if he doesn't want to be there, what do you want to do?
And if Bellator is going to give him as much money or more, then why wouldn't he leave? In fact, a lot of guys these days are happy to leave because they get their sponsorship money back when they don't have to be under Reebok anymore.
Exactly. So, I think it's a byproduct of the Reebok deal.
It is.
Now, Bellator also has signed a contract extension with A.J. McKee.
That's right, son of a former guest of our show, Antonio McKee. He's 3-0 this year, and they like what they see from him in his fights because he keeps getting finishes, so they feel like he's a big-time future prospect, and they want to keep him around.
Not a bad extension, if you ask me. That's smart planning.
Yeah, good investment for their future. And he's an exciting young fighter.
As far as the upcoming events, we've got something called Ryzen Fighting Federation coming up. I remember that.
Yeah, and that's the one I interviewed King Mo for because he's part of the heavyweight tournament.
That's New Year's Eve or Breakfast with Fedor, I believe it's called. And also January 2nd is the next card for UFC. It's Lawler and Condit, which they're going back to naming the shows again. This is what is this one called?
I believe it's something like Terror or Ferocity, something like that.
Or,
What'd you say?
Terrifying?
Yeah, Terrifying, that's it.
I like the way they're going back to putting names on them instead of just UFC insert number here.
Mm-hmm.
But, on paper, this fight looks really good.
Honestly, if you're going to pick two welterweights to describe as terrifying, these are the two guys that I would give it to, because we've already seen what Lawler did in that fight with McDonald. That's one of the biggest wars of all time. And Condit just has this way of just getting into scraps and either destroying people or just coming out looking like a war victim. I can't think of a better word for either of these guys in their weight class.
I'd put McDonald front and center in the cage, like front row seat for this one.
Well, he's definitely got an argument that if he could get a fight with either one of these guys, he could win it, because he nearly won that fight with Lawler. We both know he was that close.
And against Condit in Vancouver.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I don't know if these guys are the top money draws. I mean, people have made this argument about who's a money draw in UFC right now and who's not, but let me just put it in the hardcore fan perspective here that if you want to see a good fight, regardless of whether somebody is a money draw or a big personality or whatever, you give me any combination of Lawler, Condit, and McDonald, any two of those three fighting each other, you are getting a great fight, guaranteed.
I'm wary when McDonald comes back from his last fight because the beating he got, that's...
Like I said, Lawler deserves the word terrifying for a reason.
Yeah, it was... I really don't know who you put in front of McDonald for his next fight, because I don't know if you give him a top 1, top 2 fighter. Do you give him like a number 5 or a number 6 to shake off the cobwebs before going back for the title? Or, I mean, what do you do? It's in a weird spot right now.
Well, the thing you actually really got to worry about here is the Junior Dos Santos effect, where you can still be ranked at the top of the weight class, but what if that last fight you had in the weight class took so much out of you that you're never the same again? I think, and we've seen it now after his wars with Kane and Stipe Miocic, that Junior Dos Santos is not the same guy anymore, and we don't know how much that fight with Lawler took out of McDonald, but let's hope it didn't take a lot.
Look at the Frankie Edgar effect as well. Long layoff, and now he's back fighting for a title.
Absolutely. Sometimes being out for a long time makes you even better. Nate Diaz, another perfect example.
Nick Diaz, not so much.
No, but Nate definitely, I'll give him all the credit in the world. Nate fought the perfect fight.
Only the football fans will get this, but who did Nate Diaz think he was? Odom Beckham Jr.?
Yeah, you're talking about that brawl that he got in with the Carolina Panthers player?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like 3 personal fouls in one game. I thought after 2 you were supposed to be ejected, but apparently it doesn't work that way.
Well, they suspended Beckham Jr. for 1 game this week, so...
Well, then it kind of did end up being that after all, but it's not, well, you know what? It's not like he's blameless in this, because that guy that was getting into it with him was just as much at fault.
And suspend both of them.
They should have.
Oh boy. Anyways, so we don't have any shows next week, which is not. So we don't have any shows this weekend, I should say, because it is the Christmas holidays. So we won't get anything until Breakfast with Fedor. So next week we'll break down Ryzen Fighting Federation, and I believe we'll also talk some UFC, which we just talked about there.
I believe it's actually Ryzen World Fighting, by the way.
Oh, it's so many different names. I find they change it up. And Fedor's opponent is
Jaideep Singh.
Woohoo.
Yeah, Bobby Lashley is probably pissed right now.
I would say if it was Lashley against Fedor, it will have a better viewership outside in North America. And I'm not, saying anything bad against the opponent here. Saying it's just look at the record.
Exactly. They've not saying it's a tomato can, but I'm saying it's a tomato can. They gave somebody for Fedor to beat.
Yeah, and whoop-de-doo, we're going to see Fedor win a nothing fight.
Well, I think they were afraid if they gave that fight to Bobby Lashley that Fedor might lose.
But don't you want... What's the old saying? There's no such thing as bad publicity?
Right, but if you're Saki Kabara and you're trying to build the new Pride and you want to use the old Pride stars to do it, you don't want them to lose in the main event of the first card. I kind of see the logic there.
Hey, maybe Henderson can be let out of his contract and go to that federation too.
I sincerely doubt UFC is going to do that, especially since Bellator is partnered up with Saki Kabara on this. That's why King Mo's in the heavyweight tournament. That's why Irish Brennan Ward is on this card too.
How was that interview with King Mo, by the way?
It was fantastic. I love talking to him. They could give me 10 interviews with him, I'd take 10.
Any outlandish predictions?
Nothing outlandish, just that he'd beat Brett McDermott in the opening round, and then he'd take it from there.
One fight at a time. I like the strategy.
He actually wanted to have 2 fights in the opening round. He said he'd rather have 2 in one night and one the next than the other way around. He said he'd be fresher and be more fun to get the knockouts and then come back and prepare for one more fight the next day, but he'll take it how they give it to him.
All right, well, that's going to do it for an episode of Glove Up or Shut Up this week. Stevie, you got any closing plugs?
Just thank you for continuing to listen to Glove Up or Shut Up, and follow us on Facebook, tinyurl.com/GloveUp will take you to our page, and we're both on Twitter. I'm at AngryMarks. Peter, what's yours?
At HardcoreCDN.
That's right. And for more of my interview with King Mo, check out MMAmania.com. And for Bellator and World Series fighting coverage, I do live recaps for them as well.
Just want to say, everybody out there listening, thank you for listening for, what is it, now 5 years, I'd say, Stevie?
Something like that. We've been around for a little while, and I want to thank you for being part of AngryMarks.com for all this time, and I want to say Merry Christmas to you and your family, and Happy Birthday as well.
Well, thank you. Yes, birthday is on Christmas, so double whammy there. What can I do? But I want to wish everybody listening, and to you, Stevie, and your family, Merry Christmas as well. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. I hope you have a great one, and don't drink and drive.
Absolutely. Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas, or Festivus even. Whatever you do, have a good holiday season.
All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H, Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. As I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.